welcome to episode 23 of Sailing Beyond Knowledge. I'm joined today by Patrick Kelly, who is the author of a great website called Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices, and it's also the title of a book that you can download on the website, which has a plethora of information. Hello Patrick, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a real honour to have you here with us today, and thanks for taking the time out.
It's very kind of you to say so.
Okay. Well, your book and the website is just thoroughly impressive. I mean, there's about 15 chapters and appendices, and on the website you have 63 patents as well for people to look at and research. 50 research papers and a plethora of other information, and the book itself is downloadable for free. A very detailed analysis of free or alternative solution energy devices, very valuable information that you've taken the time out onto the internet. How did you come about starting this research, and what was the inspiration for you to put that amount of work and time and energy into educating people to what is available in terms of alternative energy devices?
Well, the interest started in 1985 with a television program entitled It Runs on Water, put out by a television channel here called Channel 4. I did an engineering course and have a degree in engineering, and one of the general central themes of engineering science is the law of conservation of energy, which says that you can't take more out of a system than you put into a system. And that is almost true, but not quite. Mm-hmm. You can't take more energy out of a system than goes into the system, but you yourself don't necessarily have to put it there. Now, I wasn't aware of this until the program itself brought this sort of information to the attention of people generally. It wasn't a very well presented program at all, in that it didn't give you any scope for following up, didn't give you any references where you could start researching the subject. But one of the things that was interesting was a presentation by Stan Mayer in the United States, mm-hmm. where he showed that it was possible to split water rather than using electrolysis, a system that required far less energy. Now, I couldn't see this very well on the television screen. I recorded it on videotape, and I tried to make out the patent number that they showed briefly on it. And I rang up the patent office in Britain and said, look, I don't really have the full information here, but there was a patent by a chap called Stan Mayer, at which point the man listening to me started laughing and said, yeah, we've had dozens and dozens of people asking about this. What I do is I will send you a list of about 40 of his patents, and then you can ring me back and order the ones you want. So I ordered about 4 or 5 of them. They cost £10 each.
Oh gosh.
Get a paper copy. And my interest started from there, and it was that point that made me aware of the fact that there was such a thing as free energy. Mm-hmm. This, of course, is pretty silly, because if you think about it, the evidence is all around you. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, that you can draw energy from the wind with windmills and with wind generators. You don't have to put any energy in. It comes flowing in from the environment. The same with water. You can take the water flowing in a river and use a water wheel, and that will generate energy for you that you can use. The same applies to tides. If you've got a big bay on the coast and you build walls out so that the incoming tide has to flow through a small gap, you can then power generators both when the tide's coming in and when the tide's going out. And that happens very, very regularly and reliably. Mm-hmm. The same again from waves. If there is the wind blowing and waves are on the surface of the sea, which is usual, you can generate a very large amount of energy from the waves themselves, both simply with equipment that you can build yourself as an individual, or large devices which have got no moving parts other than the generator, which can be built into the seabed floor. You can also get, obviously, lots of other energy coming in for free from the environment. You've got sunlight, which will heat water or generate electricity from solar panels. You've got geothermal energy, where the difference in temperature between down low on the earth and on the surface is sufficient to drive generators. Very simply, obviously, the sun shines on plants and they grow, and when you dry them off, you can burn them and get energy from that, biomass. There are other sorts, of course. When I was very young, in the days of gas lights and steam.
Well, we don't know how old you are here, so.
I'm in my late 60s.
I wasn't asking.
When I was young, there were no real electronic components available, and we built crystal radio receivers, generally from wire and from a crystal and what's called a cat's whisker. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that is actually a key component of extracting energy from the environment.
Yes.
There is a patent out by a chap called Raymond Phillips, who shows how to take an aerial, choose some form of radio station, whatever frequency you like, and tune it and produce current which will run lights and charge batteries. That's quite a low power operation, but it does work. You can also pull energy from the general environment itself. Conventional science will always assure you that there is a very large difference in voltage as you rise up from the surface of the earth.
Right.
So much so that if you're standing on the ground, your head is probably several hundred volts higher voltage than your feet.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, most people don't realize that.
Yes.
They hear the fact in college and school, and yes, they accept it.
Yeah.
They don't actually think about the consequences of it.
No.
But we're just used to having our head at much higher voltage than our feet.
Yeah.
But you know what happens when you connect a wire between high voltage and low voltage?
No, I don't.
a current flows.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, this is how battery-operated equipment works. One of the terminals of the battery is a higher voltage than the other. You connect the two with a wire and put a bulb, say, in the wire, and the bulb lights up. You're getting power running through the bulb. Now, the same thing applies in the environment. If you've got several hundred volts at your head and 0 volts at your feet, if you use an earth, you can power equipment doing that. Once you get the technique, that is. There is a patent which is very, very informative from a German gentleman called Hermann Plauston. And he shows lots of different ways of actually utilizing this energy. You put up an aerial and you can pull an awful lot of power out of the air. He refers to small systems as being ones that will give you 100 kilowatts or less. He thinks in terms of hundreds of kilowatts coming from an aerial with no input power at all. So there's the potential all around us for this sort of energy to be taken and used.
Yes. Well, how long did it take you to put such an in-depth scope of information and a really brilliant analysis of the information that you have put on the website for people? How long did that take you in terms of years or time? Or
well, it's not really a case of sitting down and producing a book on the subject at all. I was researching the subject because I was interested. In the early years, there was almost nothing on the web about it.
Wow.
There was almost nothing in books about it. And it's a case of searching and seeing what you could find, deciding which things were reliable information and which were jokes, and then putting them together to discover what is the background operation in all of this. And it's a case of just my publishing my own research notes of what I've discovered, and it's not a case of a finished product. Typically, this gets about 70 updates each year. Mm-hmm. It's a continuously moving subject, and it's accelerating. So, to answer your question, I suppose, there are about 750,000 words in the ebook and about 3,000 illustrations. So, you're talking that, and putting up the websites took about 9 million keystrokes. which is why I keep wearing out keyboards.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing how you've kept a record of that in such detail. I mean, are any of those diagrams designed by you at all?
Oh, nearly all of them.
Oh, that's impressive. My partner was asking me this. He's actually given me a few questions to ask you.
Sure. Yeah, most of them are produced with the free Paint program in Windows.
Okay.
I occasionally get people asking me what package I use, and then they go away all dispirited, and I say it's just the Paint program, because they were hoping there's some magical program package that would sort of let them draw things without being able to draw. And I'm afraid it doesn't actually work like that.
Okay.
The reason I picked the Paint program is that it's cheap. Very cheap. It's free, in fact.
Yeah.
And it lets you work down to individual pixels on the screen. So it means you can be very accurate. And it's a simple program. It's easy to remember the commands. And it's quite powerful. There are one or two things it doesn't do, but generally speaking, it's pretty good.
Well, they're very impressive diagrams, I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to give listeners the website address. Can you believe it? It's www.free-energy-info.uk. That's Sorry, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, .co.uk.
Yeah, that's right.
Or alternatively .com. There are actually 6 sites.
Oh, okay.
There are 5 mirror sites because if one gets knocked over, then it doesn't take out the information entirely.
That's very clever.
Well, it's happened about twice already. Two of the
well, you can
sites have been taken down.
You can understand why it's that leads on to my second question. Most listeners will have some idea that the subject of solution or free energy involves a silent yet aggressive suppression. What's your perspective and experience of this?
Of actual suppression. The suppression is extremely widespread and very violent. It's very understandable in actual fact, because if you think about it, a company like Shell BP, which is just one of dozens of different oil companies, they make a net profit of about £1.5 million an hour. So let me rephrase that. Every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, they get an extra £1.5 million to play with. Now, you can understand that they were going to be very upset if somebody comes along and says, hey, wouldn't you like to buy this generator? This generator only costs you £2,000 and it produces all the electricity you'll ever want. No fuel, you don't have to buy oil, you can run your electric car on this without buying any oil or petrol or anything. Wouldn't you like it? Well, the answer is the oil company wouldn't like it.
No.
And the people who would like it even less is the government. The government is taking roughly 85% of the cost that you pay at the fuel pump for tax. And they are not going to be at all happy if you suddenly decide, oh, I can run a car without buying oil at all. Now, in this country, they have trialed a pilot scheme whereby instead of charging for the oil, they're going to charge you to use the roads. It doesn't matter the fact that you've paid for the roads and for their maintenance. They're still going to charge you for using your own roads.
Right.
And the charges have been up as high as £1.20 per mile on a motorway. It means if you want to drive 200 or 300 miles to visit one of your family, it's going to cost you hundreds of pounds.
God.
You know, ridiculous. But I think they trial the system to get it going and get it tested, so that when free energy comes in, and I think it's unstoppable at this stage, that when it does come in, that they have some other way of screwing money out of you. From which you can gather, I'm not very keen on governments and taxes and so on.
No, but that's understandable. I think most of my listeners agree with you there, and so do I.
I don't mind taxes that are used for the benefit of the people.
No,
but most of the taxes are not used for the benefit of the people.
No,
but anyway,
not.
We won't go into that. That's not the subject.
But it is. It's partly, it's so intrinsically involved with the issue here. I mean, it's been something over a century, isn't that a fact?
Yes. Yes.
So,
actually, you asked me specifically about suppression, and I've only answered you generally. A friend of mine, Dave Lawton, down in Wales, he and I have run a couple of free energy conferences in the UK here. He managed to reproduce the system generated by Stan Mayer, whereby you could split water at very low voltage.
Wow.
And a lot of people have replicated that since on the back of what he has done. But he went to the local Welsh authority to see if he could get a grant on another thing he was developing. And he got a visit from two people, surprisingly dressed in black, who were extremely odd people, very, very peculiar. They asked lots of questions. They took his documentation. They went away, said they would be in touch. After a while, there was nothing from them, so he rang up the Environment Agency and asked about them, and they said, oh, they're not from us at all. So he said, well, can I have their phone number, because there's stuff of mine I need returned. And they said, well, no, we can't give you their phone number. We're not allowed. That's interesting. So eventually, he got a message to them saying he wanted his stuff back, and they said, oh, we posted it back 2 days ago. And he kept on and on at them, and eventually he got this stuff back, but the postmark showed clearly that it had been posted the day before. But that's just a gentle one. A friend of mine in India called Ravi followed up what Dave Lawton had done and produced another copy of the water splitting cell. He's a mechanical engineer, and he did videos and did a lot of discussion on the forums, did YouTube videos, and got quite high profile. He was raided by 5 carloads of people who were supposed to have been from the local VAT office. And instead of just taking his records, they went into his workshops, they took his materials, they took his cell, and they said to him, if you go on talking, you better not go on talking about this. You better keep quiet about this cell. Eventually got some of his stuff back. He got onto the local VAT office people and asked them, what was all this about? And they said, well, I'm sorry, but they weren't from us at all. But the funny bit in actual fact on that is that he had just finished all his experimentation on splitting water. He'd finished and stopped off. And they hit him just after he'd stopped. But this is quite typical operation. A friend of mine called Bill Williams in the States, the US, produced a very, very difficult cell to get working called the Joe cell, named after Joe Noble, who was one of the people who developed it and sort of publicized it more than anything. It's a very tricky thing to get going, but he persevered, and he got it working on his Ford pickup truck. And his old Ford pickup truck was acting like a racing car with this thing attached. The slightest touch on the accelerator would take you from like 25 miles an hour to 60 in next to no time at all. So before he came into a town, he pulled off to the side of the road to see if he could sort of tone this thing down. And as he stopped off, a big 4x4, pulled in just in front of him, and 2 men who were armed with pistols got out, and they handed him a dossier 2 inches thick with photographs of all his family, his children,
Oh my God.
timetables of where they are at each moment of each day. And they said, you must destroy this cell and stop talking about it.
Oh my God.
Or else. He didn't take very kindly to that.
No.
Unfortunately, their timing again was just wrong, because by coincidence, the night before, he'd put out onto the web some engineering drawings of how he'd made it. The night before, I had emailed him and said, these are very nice, do you mind if I put them into my ebook? And he said, no, that's fine, go ahead, you're welcome. So the moment that he alerted us to the fact that he had been intimidated like this, or attempted an intimidation by these people, I put the information that he had on the web, and at least 10,000 people had it within 2 or 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
The big advantage of that is it's no longer any advantage to the people in trying to intimidate him to do anything to him, or because they don't gain anything by it.
No.
All they do at that stage is, if they were to attack him or his family, would be to sort of give a stamp of approval to how good his system is. So it just doesn't pay them to get nasty. They came back to him again a couple of weeks later at his house, and he saw them off with a shotgun. and he pointed this out to the local sheriff, and the local sheriff got very uptight about it too. He was not at all happy about armed men coming in and throwing their weight about in his manner.
No.
He didn't like it at all. They haven't been back since.
It's good to know he's still alive and his family are okay.
Yeah, he's fine. He has connected this cell now differently. He's put it so that it's connected to the carburetor on his vehicle. And he drives around. The engine is perfectly able to draw in fuel, but it doesn't. And he's driving around and using absolutely no fuel at all.
Brilliant.
He does quite a lot of work out in the forest areas, and he drives around a lot on rough tracks. But he says his fuel consumption is 0.
Amazing.
The fuel's there. The engine could use it.
Yeah.
But that's fairly typical of what happens. There's another chap called John Bedini in the US, very gifted gentleman. He built a device called a Tesla switch. He built it into a little cigar box as a demonstration unit. And he showed it at a technical conference in the States called the Tesla Tech Conference in 1984 or 85. I don't remember which year. I think it may have been 85. And he had this running, powering itself, keeping its batteries charged and powering a load. And he had it running for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, some people visited him again in his workshop. They pushed him up against the wall, shoved a gun in his face and said, "You're going to buy gasoline for the rest of your life." And they smashed his Tesla switch.
Oh gosh.
And it's taken him about 20 years to pluck up the courage to even speak about it again.
Oh dear.
But that is fairly typical of what goes on. He's one of the lucky ones. Eugene Melov.
Yes, I've heard of Eugene Melov.
Yes, Eugene Melov was due to show the U.S. senator a free energy device.
That's right.
And a few days beforehand, he was beaten to death.
Yeah, he got bludgeoned to death in his backyard.
Yes, indeed. So this is the sort of opposition that comes to people who deal with that. Let's go more recent. Bob Boyce in the States produced a system which was and is roughly 1,200% efficient according to Faraday. It's like a big version of the cell that Dave Lawton produced, using plates instead of pipes. It can produce anything between 50 and 100 liters of hydroxy gas in each minute. It's a really serious amount. Now, he got a message fed to him from the US military saying, it's all right to produce boosters to improve the miles per gallon of vehicles. It is not all right to run a car on water alone. so you had better cease and desist. Now, that is within the last year.
That's from the US military?
Yes. I could name you the person who carried the message, but I don't want to.
No, don't. I don't want that information either.
I can do that privately.
That would put me in jeopardy as well.
No, it wouldn't put you. No. It wouldn't put you in jeopardy. They're only concerned about people who will present finished product to other people.
Yes, I realise.
They reckon that most people are incapable of making these things themselves.
That's right. Well, there is, it takes an expert, and the knowledge behind this that it takes to get to that point is just so in-depth in itself. I mean, I'm coming from an environmental biology background, and I have absolutely no physics, electrical and energy knowledge myself, so no, I'm just a little bit paranoid for information, but just personal stuff.
No, I don't think in actual fact you need worry at all. They're not too fussed about people like me who just talk.
Yeah.
They're not even that much fussed about people who make things. They're not concerned about Dave Lawton because he's the sort of person who's driven by curiosity. In fact, his cell had reached his spares box by the time I discovered he had it. And I persuaded him then to let me write up about it. But this is the way that most inventors are. They're driven by curiosity, and when they solve one problem, they don't document it, they don't do anything with it, they just take it apart and use the bits for something else. The next thing that interests them, whatever it is. So, generally speaking as well, inventors and experimenters like that are incapable of stringing two words together. And they're totally incapable of actually doing any form of business operation. Not a chance.
Yeah.
Somebody like Dave, who's near genius and can make most things work where the others can't, is not really of any risk or threat to them, because he's the sort of person who's just curious about the way the world works more than anything else. I've spoken to him, and he's told me he was going to do a post to one of the forums, and he told me what he was going to say, and I thought it was fine. And then I saw his post to the forum, and knowing what he was on about, I still couldn't make head or tail of what he was trying to say. I don't think there was a single person on the forum understood anything that he was trying to get across. Most people don't get the hang of how you actually present things.
No.
Start at the beginning and you progress through to the end.
Well, on your website, which is one of the wonderful things about it, is that you do say for people who have absolutely no knowledge of how to build these things to go to chapter 12.
Yes.
The electronics tutorial.
Yes, it's only a basic thing to bring people up to the level where they can understand the sort of circuits that are used with these sort of devices and design and build their own. They're not actually that difficult. Electronics is not really difficult at all. But like a lot of subjects, it's made to seem difficult by the way it's taught. I don't actually think there is a difficult subject in the world. I think it's just bad teaching. Makes some of them seem difficult. Or
repression of knowledge,
It's the way that they're presented. I mean, somebody who's really expert will make something, will present a subject so it seems interesting and very simple. It's not a difficult thing to do in actual fact once you get the hang of it. But we're only scratching the surface here. Those are some of the people anyway that I know of who have been picked on. There are a lot of other people who weren't as lucky as them. There was a guy who developed a battery that was credit card size and very powerful, and he was bumped off at one of the airports, Charlotte Airport. I passed through it a few weeks after he'd been knocked off. They made it look like death from a heart attack because they've a very nice longitudinal beam device that does that in about 30 seconds.
Yeah, and you know what? You've just confirmed one of my theories.
What's that?
That's possibly it's something that can be induced.
Oh yes, very definitely.
Yeah.
The covert development in the States is somewhere between 50 and 1,000 years ahead of our normal everyday, non-covert technicalities.
That's right.
If you consider how far we've come in the last 100 years, then try and visualize several hundred years more, you can see the sort of difference that it makes. But anyway, I don't want to get into that sort of subject. That sounds sort of too conspiracy theory style. Let's try and stick with the simple facts here.
Just an inquisitive question here. You have a Gaelic phrase on your website. What does it mean, and how do you pronounce it?
At the top right as you come in, it says Céad Míle Fáilte.
Say it again slowly.
Céad Míle Fáilte.
Okay.
Céad is 100, Míle is 1,000, and Fáilte is welcome.
Oh.
So 100,000 welcomes. It's a traditional Irish greeting.
Okay.
And at the end there is a two-word goodbye, which is Slán Agat. Yes. Slán Agat is what you would say to somebody when you're staying and they're going.
Okay.
That's just it, by the way, and it's merely put on there to try and persuade people that I'm not English, I'm Irish.
It's amazing you've got a Spanish translation as well, because I tell you, I mean, I've lived in Central and South America. It's where I'm based most of the time, and most of my work is around and down there, so I'll be passing this on to all my Spanish contacts. And this kind of information is just so important to communities down there. So
yes. My problem is that I don't speak any language other than English, which is difficult. So the translations have been done by other people very kindly. Yeah. And generally speaking, they don't have very much time. So the Spanish ones are way out of date. Only about half of them are done. Okay. I was very kindly been done by one gentleman who's now moved from South America to Australia, and at the moment he's out of a job and busily job hunting. So I haven't had any Spanish translation work done in a very long time. Well, let's ask listeners to volunteer, and also I can possibly put you in touch with someone who has got time. that would be very nice. Yeah. I had quite a pleasant surprise the other day when a Russian-speaking person said he would like to do translation work. Yeah. And I said, as I said to all the people, I say, look, this is a very large volume. Yes, it is. If you want to try starting, by all means do. But he translated the introduction into Russian, and it's now there on the websites. Websites are very simplistic, quite deliberately. They're not fancied up at all. The objective is to have the website load quickly. You're not hanging around, and there's something there to see. And it's Jana's one long page that you just scroll down and down and down to make it easy for people who are not that familiar with the web to actually follow it. Yes. Then all the various bits and pieces from there on in just spread out like branches of a tree. So if you click on a document, it feeds you the document. I picked PDF format so that it's not a format that readily carries anything like a virus. It's a format that is easy for people to get and read, and the reader is a free download if you don't already have it. So that's why most of the documents are in PDF. It's also a very compact format, but it's only about a seventh the size of the Word document that originates it. Yeah. So it's deliberately very simplistic. It's not that I couldn't do it. I mean, I have worked for years as a professional analyst programmer. Oh, okay. And done all sorts of work like graphics and morphing and animation and all sorts. It's not a case that I'm not able to do it. It's a case that I don't want to do it. Right. I don't think it's helpful for people to have fancy moving images all over the place. All they do is distract people. Yes. So it's aimed at being very simple and very straightforward. Right. But we're only scratching the surface here. Oh, I know. I mean, it's okay. We've got a bit of time. That's good. That's good. Let me take you on to the next step then. Okay. I have got other questions. Yes. Okay. Far ahead. No, you carry on. If you've got more to say on this subject, please. Yes. Yeah, very much so. Now, we are actually sitting in a sea of energy. We're completely surrounded by energy everywhere. And we can pick up that energy if we want. It's called the general background energy of the environment, or the zero-point energy field, or there are a whole string of different names for it. But the bottom line is that there's energy all around us, and if you have a system that is producing energy, a thing about it is that if you increase the voltage, the output power goes up with the square of the voltage. If you increase the frequency, the output power goes up with the square of the frequency. So if you've got a system that's working at sort of mains frequency, 50 or 60 cycles a second, on say 12 volts, if you double the voltage and double the frequency, you get 16 times as much power coming out.
Wow.
Which means that if you jack the voltage up to like 9 or 10,000 volts and jack the frequency up to 30,000 cycles a second or more, you start pulling off serious amounts of power. There's a gentleman who is very expert in that called Don Smith in the States. He has produced about 50 different designs which pull something like 100 kilowatts or more just straight out of what appears to be the air. It's all very straightforward science, but most people aren't familiar with the science.
Sorry, just to interject quickly, because that relates to one of my questions. Is it possible for you to explain to listeners your understanding of what the Casimir effect is?
Yes, I suppose so. I wouldn't claim to be an expert on this.
Okay.
The Casimir effect is where two metal plates are suspended very close together, and it's then observed the fact that they move towards each other. Okay? So the gap between them should be wider, but they seem to be pushing towards each other. It is actually in the ebook, but some people will say it's due to one effect or another. Personally, I think it's the zero-point energy field, which is moving in all directions equally all the time. Yeah. And what happens is, when it hits one of the plates, some of the energy is absorbed by the atoms and molecules in the plate itself, just a very tiny amount. And the same on the plate the other side. So they are getting slightly more push from outside than they are from the inside of the gap, and that makes them move together slightly. Yeah. So I think you'll find that that's what causes gravity as well. Yeah, that's interesting. If you have a pendulum near a very large mountain, it doesn't hang vertically. It moves towards the mountain very slightly. I think you'll find that that's the same effect. It's the zero-point energy field which is flowing through the mountain. Some of it gets absorbed by the material of the mountain and keeps the mountain going by giving extra energy to the atoms, molecules, electrons and so on there. And that causes a slight imbalance in the push. And that again is the sort of Casimir effect. And again creates gravity, I would think. Again, I don't claim to be an expert in this. No. In fact, I don't claim to be an expert in anything.
Well, as far as many are concerned, the reaction that I've had to your website is you definitely know your information in this field of technology. It's just overwhelming information and very in depth. But one of the things that leads back to what you were just talking about is I myself am going to be doing a lot of research on gravity and the relation to the connection to solar energy. Yes. Because some say that free energy is not exactly free, as it's part of a fractal system that's connected to and therefore taxing the Earth's gravity field. Yes. And what's your view on this?
Well, let me put it in context for you. Somebody who is really expert in this subject has calculated the amount of energy that's contained in every single 1 cc. That's a cubic centimeter. That's a centimeter across, centimeter deep, centimeter long. Tiny amount. It's about a fifth of a teaspoonful, just to give you a hang of it. The energy in that is calculated to be sufficient to create all of the visible matter in all of the universe.
Wow.
Right. So, yes,
that's mind-blowing.
Yes, you could actually deplete the energy by using it for 1,000 million years at a tremendous rate. You might reduce it by 0.00000 recurring percent. It really is not physically possible. Also, there is another sort of rule of thumb which I think is quite likely to be fully correct, and that is that you can neither create nor destroy energy. Now, if that's the case, there is no way that anything you could do could possibly affect the energy of the Earth, the solar system, or the universe. Not a chance. I mean, people talk about using up energy and consuming energy, which is a ridiculous statement. They say a 100-watt light bulb consumes energy all the time it's on. It doesn't. There's no such thing as consuming energy.
That's part of our conditioning.
Yes, absolutely. People who put that across are not familiar with the realities of the situation.
No.
All you can do with energy is convert it from one form to another. And if you're slick, you then convert it from the other form back into the first form. And you get it to do useful work in both directions. And it's quite straightforward to do that. The background energy that we're talking about here, generally speaking, the way to access it is through magnetism. Magnetism is the key, typically, to getting a link into this energy field. There are various ways that it can be done. Let me just run through some of the people who have achieved it different ways.
Yeah, okay, that's great. You're welcome to. I mean, that's one of my questions as well, because we want you to explain, you know, how permanent magnets are used. And
all right, okay. First of all, let's take our friend Raymond Phillips. He produces probably about 5 watts of power by taking a radio aerial and rectifying the signal and turning it into direct current. So he does it by putting a little aerial up and not using any battery at all, just rectifying what comes down the aerial. He's small time, but his patent is there. Let's say 5 watts. It will charge batteries. If you take Bob Boyce, while his prime interest is in hydroxy and splitting water into gas, his actual system involves using an iron dust toroidal transformer. It's about 6.5 inches in diameter, very heavy, and he winds coils round it. And if you pulse one coil, you actually get a return pulse on all 3 coils.
Wow.
This is rather interesting, because it means that if you pulse one, you get 3 pulses coming back, and if you take the 3 pulses and rectify them, you actually get more than you pushed in the first place, which is very interesting. There's a guy called Johan in South Africa who has been using this very happily. He pulses the 3 coils, the 3 windings, with 3 little oscillators at different frequencies. And the thing is really amusing. He has a little girl who drives a toy car, you know, like 3 feet long, wide, that sort of thing. It's powered by an 18 amp hour car battery, ordinary lead acid battery. She drives her little car around during the day, and in the night, her daddy takes the car battery and connects this Bob Boyce system to it. The battery in the car powers the system, and it charges up the battery for the next day. Now, according to conventional science, that is impossible. But he's done it more than 35 times at this stage, so it's not impossible. What it's actually showing us is that the theory that we operate from is not sufficiently advanced to cover all aspects.
No.
It needs to be expanded.
It needs to be rewritten and explored.
It needs to be expanded to cover other systems. They were originally defined by James Clerk Maxwell. He put them into equations, but he used a very difficult notation called quaternions.
Say that again?
The mathematical system he used is called quaternions.
Okay.
It's used a lot now in the very low-level examinations, down at particle level. Quantum mechanics people use that maths nowadays all the time. But in his day, there were only about 35 people in the world could understand it. So some people took his equations and said, oh, it's easier if we don't do this. Let's throw away this component here, because we'll never actually use that. And that's the component that shows that you can get free energy. So they threw that away, and they touted the equations now as being Maxwell's, which they aren't. These are bastardized versions of Maxwell's equations, where the nitty-gritty has been taken out. But Maxwell's equations showed quite clearly that you could get free energy from the environment if you wanted it. But the Bob Boy system, let's say it produces about 12 watts the way it is at the moment. It could be developed more, but let's say it does about 12 watts. Let's move on. 15 watts you can get from John Bedini's battery pulsing systems. The chap in Canada called Ron Pugh, he's got a very nice system there. And what you do is you use one battery to run this pulsing system, and the pulsing system will charge a whole bank of batteries. And when you're finished charging the bank of batteries, you take one of them to drive the system, and you can charge another bank, and so on, and so on, and so on. He's getting about 11 times more power out than he puts in. It's called the coefficient of performance, COP.
Right.
Coefficient of performance is the amount of energy you're getting out divided by the amount of energy that you, the user, has to put in to make it work.
Right.
Now, it's not a case of how much is actually going into the system. It's you put in. I mean, if you take a solar panel in sunlight, it'll generate electricity. How much effort do you have to put in to make it generate electricity? There's none.
Yeah.
The panel sits in the sunlight arrives for free, it spews out a nice current all the time. Actually, that's one of the techniques that you can use with this battery pulsing system. John Bedini has now just gone commercial with a device where you can use a solar panel to power it, and the big advantage is that it will charge your battery banks even when there's not enough sunlight for the solar panel normally to do it.
Wow.
The pulsing system doesn't need anything like as much voltage.
So, a lot of these devices that you're talking about that utilize a battery are able to self-charge while they're running.
There are possibilities of doing that.
Yeah.
Usually it's not self-charging. It's quite difficult to self-charge.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you want the battery that you're charging to be at a different voltage to the one that's driving the system. So you want the charging battery to be what's called floating relative to your driving battery.
Okay.
So this is the problem with John Bedini's systems, is you can't take a load off the battery bank you're charging while you're actually doing the charging, which is, to put it mildly, a bit of a pain. But anyway, that's about 15 watts there. There is one on this display at the moment which does about 20 watts, and they're going to develop up to at least 300. It was built by a gentleman called Mr. Tong, T-O-N-G, and has been promoted by a gentleman called Lawrence Chung, T-S-E-U-N-G. These are Chinese gentlemen. They have it on display in Hong Kong. You're welcome to go and check it with your own equipment, your own meters, and when you've checked it, you're entitled, if you want, to take it apart to make sure that there's no hidden power source in it. It puts out 3.3 times as much power as you actually put in.
Wow.
This is it's built of wood. It's not exactly high-tech. It's just magnets and coils and a wheel that spins round and round. Very straightforward. No special things about it. That's about 20 watts at the moment. It will go much bigger. Let's go up to something else that does about 100 watts. If you go to your local shop and buy a drum of coaxial cable, like is used on television aerials, if you bake that in your oven for, doing it properly, if you bake it in the oven correctly for 2 or 3 days, and then let it sit and cool down slowly for about a week. That then, when it sits on your desk, will produce 10,000 volts at about 10 milliamps, which is about 100 watts of power. No moving parts. It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's merely pulling in energy from the environment. It's called an electret.
An electret.
E-L-E-C-T-R-E-T, electret.
Mm-hmm.
It's well known in science. There's nothing mystical about it. But this is a neat way of actually making one yourself if you want it. But let's say, for argument's sake, that you're not very good at getting the high voltage down to the voltage you want. Let's say it's only 50 watts instead of 100. But 50 watts from something that's cheap and doesn't have any moving parts is quite interesting. Okay, let's move on up. 250 watts. There's a Turkish gentleman called Numa Yildiz, Y-I-L-D-I-Z. He produced a magnet motor, that is a motor driven by permanent magnets. He demonstrated it to Dutch University not long ago, and when the demonstration had run for about 10 minutes, they stopped it off, and he took the whole thing apart so that they could examine it to see that there wasn't a hidden power support. And there was no hidden power source in it. It's straightforward. The COP value has to be infinity because you don't put any power in at all.
Wow.
So you're getting power out for no input power.
That's amazing.
Infinity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 250 watts. Let's move on up.
Carlita, thank you again, and I will talk to you soon. I urge all your listeners to keep tuning in to Sailing Beyond Knowledge Radio.
sailingbeyondknowledge.podomatic.com. No www. Straight from the HTTP stuff to sailingbeyondknowledge, all one word, .podomatic.com.
500 watts. I have a video of a gentleman called Floyd Sweet in America who was being filmed by Tom Bearden in America, running an early test on a system of his which is being dubbed the VTA, vacuum triode device, which is a very fancy name. All it is a magnet with 3 cords of wire wrapped around it. Now he fed in 1.2 milliwatts. That's 1.2 thousandths of 1 watt. And he got 500 watts coming out of it. Now that's a COP of 3,300.
That's amazing.
Okay. So this is not the sort of thing that you argue about and say, oh, well, you're reading the meter wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, when the gain is like over 3,000 times, there's not a lot of scope for getting it wrong. There really isn't. Another video that's now on the web, again that's showing about 500 watts, is one I particularly like. It is a gentleman from Georgia in the USSR. And unfortunately, the commentary obviously isn't in English, but it's done for Turkish TV. And it shows him actually setting up the system. He digs a hole in the ground, puts in an old car radiator with a wire twisted to it, buries it and pours some water on it to get an earth. Then he connects another wire to another earth, which is a metal pipe coming out, a water pipe with a tap on it. And then he connects his device, kicks it off with a car battery, and then he disconnects the car battery and shows it self-powering and powering 5 100-watt light bulbs. All very technical. The light bulbs are hung on flexes, suspended from a broom handle between 2 chair backs.
Right.
His electrical connections are made by cutting the cover off a wire and just twisting the bare wires together. This is his style of operation, and that is producing 500 watts of free power.
Wow.
No moving parts at all. Very neat. Very
nice.
COP
Amazing.
again is infinity.
Yeah.
We go on to another one, 800 watts. This one is quite humorous. You see it on YouTube. Some of the guys taken a high-powered water pump, and they use it to project a jet of water against a paddle wheel. They made a very crude paddle wheel out of a bicycle wheel with 4 little cups, metal cups, bolted onto it. And this thing spins the wheel, and the wheel turns a shaft which powers a generator, and the generator lights an electric light bulb. So then, very dangerously, they unplug the pump and plug it into the output of the generator. Now, why they don't use a switch, I don't know, but they're in a wet environment and they're messing around with I certainly would not recommend anybody did that. If you're going to do that, use a switch. Wire it up so you flip a switch and it switches over.
Yeah.
But they showed it running itself and powering a light bulb. So it's actually producing about 800 watts self-powered, which is nice. Again, the COP is infinity.
Wow.
Okay, let's move on up again. 3 kilowatts of output power now. We're talking Frank Prentice. He has a patent there. Very simple system. He uses a long wire as an aerial. He used to work on the railroads. So the wire that he was using was the sort that runs alongside a railway line.
Okay.
So he says, you want an awful lot of wire here, preferably half a mile to a mile, not connected to anything. And what he does is he pulses it with about half a kilowatt, 500 watts of electrical power, and he's then able to draw off 3 kilowatts of power. So he's getting a gain of about 5 to 1. Puts in 1 and he gets 6 back at it. So he's getting 5 times more out than he's putting in.
Amazing.
Which is quite neat. Very simple, 3 kilowatts. Take another one, a guy who's a friend of mine in Australia called Campbell. He has an output of about 3 kilowatts. And what he's done is he's taken a motor, an ordinary mains motor, which is driven by the 50 cycle a second 230 volt mains in Australia. He's geared it down to drive a a series of shafts and a big flywheel. Flywheel's about 20 kilograms, which is around the 35-pound mark. That's right. No, it's 40 pounds is 20 kilograms. And he has this thing going along, driving the final output shaft, which is geared up to a generator, electrical generator. And he found that he could power more equipment off the generator than the amount of current that was needed by the motor driving the system, which had him very interested. Couldn't anybody really enthusiastic about it. I asked him to try unplugging the output that was driving the motor and plugging it into the output from the generator, and to watch it like a hawk, and if it started to run away, to switch it off. And he did that, and it runs itself very nicely. It doesn't run away. Wow. The generator produces the right frequency for the motor that's driving it, and it's self-powered and will power quite a lot of other things.
Amazing.
We're talking about 3 kilowatts there, and the COP again is infinity.
Wow. Okay. So these something like that could possibly power a domestic house or domestic building.
Yes, indeed. He's developing on into a more advanced system now. But he couldn't get anybody interested. He offered it to people and they said, no, we're not interested. He went to the local power company, who's a coal mining outfit, and said, wouldn't you like to use this? And they said, no, not interested. Go away. Yeah. They can make more money, you see, without doing that.
That's true.
Okay, let's move on up. 3.5 kilowatts. A gentleman called Marvin Cole in the States, who actually wants to be a chef, not anything technical. He got in tow with Edwin Gray, and they got a design which came through a Russian from Nikola Tesla, and they actually built a series of motors. And this little motor they gave to Caltech in the States to test independently, and they had a 27-watt input, electrical input to this motor, and 10 horsepower output. That's 3.5 kilowatts coming out for 27 watts going in.
That's amazing.
That's a COP of 257. Now this is not just hearsay. This is Caltech doing the examination, testing and saying, we put our stamp on this. This is an output of 3.5 kilowatts for an input of 27 watts.
Gosh.
End of story. But he disappeared after all. I think he went off to be a chef. I don't think he could stand Ed Gray, who was quite a character.
Okay.
He was a difficult person to get along with, Ed Gray. But anyway, let's move on up. There's a guy in Canada at the moment called Richard Willis. He's got a solid-state pulsing system at the moment. The COP on it is 3,600, and he is offering units for sale anything from 4.8 kilowatts to 15 kilowatts. So he has them on offer at the moment. He has a bit of a problem in that they're giving so much power out that it tends to melt the output wires. So that's his difficulty at the moment. But he's in the multi-kilowatt range and offering it for sale at the moment.
Right.
Okay, let's move on up. 5 kilowatts.
Okay.
Thomas Henry Moray, I'm sure you've probably heard of. He was using aerial systems. Again, he's pulling the power entirely from the air. But a lot of people didn't believe him. They didn't think it could work because he did lots of public demonstrations. And one of the demonstrations was, hey, look, I've got this lot of things powered here. Let's cut the wires and put a piece of glass in between the cut wire ends. You bring your own glass. Anyone in the audience got a piece of glass, they brought with them. We put it in there, and you can see it doesn't stop it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's a different sort of energy, and it will flow quite merrily through glass because it actually rides on a magnetic field.
Wow.
It's electromagnetism.
Yeah.
It's using a different component of electricity. There are 2 varieties of electricity, but let's not go into that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could save that for another show, maybe.
if you wish. Okay, on offer at the moment, I believe commercially on offer, 5 kilowatts of electrical power from a permanent magnet motor.
Okay.
Produced over a 40-year period by a gentleman called Shenhe Wang Chinese gentleman. He has a commercial outfit attached to him who are putting large versions of this into what used to be coal-fired power stations in China, terribly polluting, but they're replacing the coal with these fuelless generators. Now, at the present moment, the World Expo is on until the 31st of October, and you can see one of these being demonstrated on a stand which is powered by another one. So the exhibition stand is being powered by one of these, and it's on demonstration there. I don't know if they're actually offering them for sale. I would imagine they are. It's one thing that I do like buying.
Yeah.
Though I doubt very much that they would be allowed to be sold here. I think it's extremely unlikely that here other states would allow such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like, that's one of the things I want to discuss as well. I mean, particularly with Britain, personally, being British myself and knowing the energy companies here have such a huge monopoly, and your experience as well. What is your feeling on the fact that, because you've said that we're going to see a commercialization and a market soon and available, how is that going to be possible with the challenge of the oligarchic and energy monopolizing system?
Well, it's difficult to say just straight off the cuff.
Yeah.
I would imagine that because the government is taking so much in the way of tax, that they will say, you cannot sell any free energy generator in this country until it has passed our safety and reliability tests. And you say, well, this particular unit has passed months of Chinese safety and reliability tests. They say, well, that's very interesting. They have to pass ours. We're not China. And they see to it that you never, ever get it past their testing. They'll organize it so the testing never succeeds. And even if it is perfect, they'll say, no, it isn't. That would be my guess, certainly, as far as that's concerned. But time will tell. There's no question about it. The free energy devices are coming in and probably become widespread this year. One of the reasons is that China is not going along with this. China is too big for them to do anything about. And if the Chinese people say, well, we've got a big market internally, we're going to make these ourselves, that's entirely up to them.
Right.
There's not a lot that the UK or the US can do about China deciding to make free energy devices if they want to.
No.
The trouble is, you see, people then become aware of it.
Yeah. So in Ireland, Ash from Panacea University was telling me the company Stern recently have something that is going to come out. What's your view on Stern?
Yes, Stern has a small device, all right. I may have missed the point, but anything I've seen so far is very non-commercial, small energy output sort of thing. They claim that this is the first ever in the entire world, which really staggers me, because all of these things, at the present moment, I think the states have managed to suppress some 44,000 patents on free energy.
Oh my goodness.
They may be unable to keep them hidden for much longer.
44,000?
Yes, 44,000 in the States alone.
That's amazing.
They've managed to do this for a long time, but it's, I think, coming to a stage where they can't do it anymore. One of their difficulties is the internet. The spread of information on the internet is so extensive.
That's right.
It becomes very difficult for them to keep on and on and on suppressing it.
Yeah.
What they do is they put disruptors into the general forums that are looking as if they can be useful.
Yeah.
These paid disruptors say rubbish, hoax,
that's right,
and all sorts of things, and they start arguments, and they really are rude to the people they reckon are serious inventors.
Yeah.
Eventually they get rid of them by putting so much rubbish posts on and annoying them so much that they go somewhere else, which is exactly what they were trying to do in the first place.
Yeah.
But let's come back to something practical. Some lads down the road from me here, they used hydroxy gas and water vapor, and they bought an electrical generator off eBay, and they managed to run the electrical generator on air, water droplets, and about 3 litres per minute of hydroxy gas, which is quite a small amount. And they test loaded this up to 4 kilowatts of excess power. It's a 5.5 kilowatt generator. That's quite impressive because it's effectively self-powered and giving 4 or 5 kilowatts. All you have to do is delay the timing to about 2 degrees after top dead center and then feed in this mixture, and it works just fine. Since I wrote that up, I've discovered about 10 different generators around the world that are running on that sort of arrangement.
Wow.
It's been done lots and lots of times. These particular people close to me are not really interested in doing it anymore. They took an engine out of a Mini and they put it up on a test bed, and when I visited them, they were running that on 4% petrol and 96% hydroxy.
Amazing.
And water mist.
Yeah.
And it was a frightening thing to stand near. They had a big glass screen erected, and everybody disappeared behind this as they walked the thing up. It's quite a fearsome noise when it's going like 5,000 to 6,000 RPM.
Oh my God.
But their interest was primarily in selling electricity back to the power company.
Right.
And then they got diverted into doing boosters, hydroxy boosters on trucking, lorry fleets.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been in touch with them for quite a while, but the thing that really interested me was the fact that you were getting more energy out than you were putting in to an ordinary generator.
Yeah.
I think it's the rotating magnetic field as much as anything that does it.
Yeah.
But a generator is geared up to provide lots and lots of electrical power, so it's nice and easy to run any form of electrolyzer from it itself.
So recently in Australia, I can't remember the name of the inventor, but there was a company that made it to Sky News, and it was a perpetual magnetic motor that they're attempting to market.
Is that the Lutech?
Yeah, I think that rings a bell.
Yeah. I'm very doubtful about the Lutech. Ash and Panacea is keen on it, but they've been around for years and years and years and years, and they haven't updated their website in several years. Their device is about 20 times larger in volume than Shenhe Wang's.
Oh, right.
In spite of the fact that it's supposed to be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I am not at all sure that that's genuine.
Well,
I'd be delighted if it is.
Yeah, I'll send you the link to it just in case it's somebody else.
I've seen it lots of times. It's been around for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
But they haven't actually done anything.
Okay.
Let's move on up our list here.
Yes.
There are another 7 to go if you've got.
Okay. I'm here until I've got to go about 4:45, so we've got about 45 minutes. We're fine.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Let me tell you about one aerial system. There's a gentleman called Lawrence Rayburn in Canada. He's a farmer, and he devised an aerial system which forms a tuned resonant cavity up to the ionosphere.
Oh, wow.
It's a very simple device, and he was intending to market kits for people to use it.
Okay.
He's pulling 10 kilowatts continuous power from it. But then he decided that it was too dangerous.
Right.
That you were getting high current, high voltage there.
Yeah.
The sort of people who were going to be messing around with these kits were quite liable to injure themselves, not realizing that a passive aerial could kill you.
Yeah. So
he decided he wouldn't do that, and I agree with him.
Yes.
I don't have it in the ebook. I don't even mention it in the ebook. It's in my opinion. I agree with them. I think it's too dangerous for the average person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind telling somebody who's an electronics expert.
It kind of sounds a bit like the HARP technology that is used on a larger scale. Obviously, that is different, but it works by beaming up to the ionosphere.
Yes, it's going up rather than coming down.
Yeah.
They're using about 1 billion watts.
Right.
The HARP system.
Right.
And unfortunately, they use it for not very
malevolent purposes. Yeah.
Indeed, yes. But anyway,
we won't go into that.
We won't go into that. No. And moving on up another step, 12 kilowatts of output power. We're talking Jim Watson here. Jim Watson built a big version of John Bedini's little self-powered motor. John Bedini produced a motor system, an ordinary DC motor, drove it with pulses very short pulses from a DC battery, no problem. Made it drive a little flywheel, heavy flywheel. Each time you pulse a flywheel, you actually pull some energy in from the environment, provided it's pulsed rather than continuously driven. So he then put a series of magnets onto a disc on their shaft and spun them just in front of an ordinary set of ordinary wire coils, which is a typical generator, a standard variety generator. He then rectified the output to get DC and fed the output back in to power the battery that was driving it. And that ran solidly for 3 years for him in his workshop.
Amazing.
No question at all. Kept charging its own battery, kept running along, kept producing motion continuously without charging the battery for 3 years.
Yeah.
And Jim Watson, when he discovered that, decided he was going to build a big version. So he used the starter motor from an aircraft. You know, the things they use jet engines with.
Yes.
And he built this thing, and he built this flywheel, must have been 8 or 10 feet in diameter. This is an enormous contraption he built, about 20 feet long, like 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall. And he showed it also at Tesla Tech. And it was powering its own batteries and giving about 12 kilowatts of excess power. It and he both were disappeared shortly afterwards.
Oh, dear.
He's okay.
Okay.
People have occasionally seen him, and he always dashes away. He looks very prosperous. But he doesn't talk about it anymore, and the machine is not to be found anywhere.
Oh, my goodness.
I think we can be reasonably sure that he was given the option of either being shot or getting rich.
Yeah.
Well, a few seconds to the side, which is it going to be, you and your family? I think he picked being rich, which is a sensible choice.
Yeah, being paid to keep your mouth shut.
Well, if they pay you to keep your mouth shut, I mean, they were actually ripped off by one of the guys in the Watercar Forum,
right.
Paul Zagouras, not very long ago. He produced a system whereby you could blast a jet of water from a hose pipe straight into gas at an enormous rate. You could just pump the water in, and all you got out the far side was gas.
Mm.
And he sort of implied that he could be bought out on this. I think they paid him $6 million for it, $6 million US for it, and they were conned because it wasn't a good system at all. It was using more power than it was generating, but it would run a marine engine certainly, but not on its own power.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they were actually conned out of $6 million. That was a useless system that they bought out for $6 million, so more power to the album. Mm. But the $6 million is only, about 4 hours profit on one small company?
Yeah.
I think they can live with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's now keeping fairly quiet. Okay, let's move on. 32 kilowatts. Again, for about 25 watts input power from a replication of the Adams motor. Quite small, only about 200 millimeters across, a single rotor with magnets on it and pickup coils. And if you pulse it just right and switch it just right and use high voltage, you can get a very large amount of power coming out of it. The guy that I'm quoting is powering his house and office on it, 32 kilowatts.
Wow.
And it's got a COP of about 1,200.
Wow.
But that's quite simple, not expensive to make, and very versatile.
Okay.
Let's move on up. 100 kilowatts or more. We're talking Don Smith, for instance. He's produced more than 4 dozen of these things. Very simple. What he does is he uses a Tesla coil, which is a coil of wire with a gap and then a smaller coil of wire inside it. And he uses high frequency, 35,000 cycles a second or more, high voltage, somewhere between 2,000 and 9,000 on his demo models, volts that is, and he tunes the thing in and he can produce easily in excess of 100 kilowatts coming out. And if you have the batteries, the leads to the batteries exactly a quarter of the wavelength of the frequency that you're using, the batteries get charged while they're powering the device. You've got power coming from the batteries driving it, and you've got charging power going back to them at a different frequency along the same wires. Battery never runs down, and you've got more than 100 kilowatts coming back out. Now, interestingly, he points out that the bulk of the energy that you're getting, their free energy, is magnetic. Two components to what we think of electricity. It's actually electromagnetism.
Yes.
In fact, I think there's also a gravitic component in it there as well. But
say that again?
I think there's a gravity component in there as well.
Okay.
Because a lot of these machines get lighter as you're using them. So that's by the way. What he points out is that in his Tesla coil, the central coil that's being oscillated is producing a magnetic wave that spreads out for a few feet. It's like a radio transmitter, but using magnetism rather than radio waves. And just in the same way that you can have either 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 radio sets tuned into a radio station, the radio station doesn't know or care. The output power that the radio station is using doesn't change no matter how many radio sets are being used. The same applies to the magnetic power from this central coil. If you dot other coils of the same frequency, tuned to the same frequency around this other one on the same board, like 15 inches away, and you get another copy of the electrical power without having to increase your input power at all. So you can stick on as many coils as you want and get as much electrical output as you want on the one drive, central drive, which is actually costing nothing because the battery is being charged all the time. But there are several systems like that. That's very neat.
Amazing.
And you're talking 100 kilowatts typically going out there if you want it. Obviously you don't have to take it as high as 100 if you don't want. Another one on 100 kilowatts or more is our friend Herman Ploston. What he does is he uses an aerial up high and he just takes the energy coming off the aerial, rectifies it, steps it down, and has very sizable amount of mains power, like 100 kilowatts or more, a lot more. This is from an aerial, no moving parts.
Incredible.
And all the details are in his patent, which reads more like a tutorial than a patent.
Is that on your website?
Oh yes.
Brilliant.
It's in the ebook. Move on up again, 223 kilowatts. A gentleman called Joseph Papp produced an engine. He took a 90 horsepower engine from a Volvo. He blanked off the intake, he blanked off the exhaust, and he filled the crankcase and machine itself with a mixture of very pure inert gases. You've got argon and krypton and xenon and the like. And he filled it with that, and then he ran a demonstration, and he produced 300 horsepower in an enclosed room for 35 minutes as a demonstration. Now that is 223 kilowatts self-powered.
So, incredible.
The COP is infinity.
Yeah.
Again, they didn't like that at all.
No, I bet they didn't.
No, very unpopular that. Let's take another guy now. We're talking 1.5 megawatts.
Right.
That's 1,500 kilowatts.
Amazing.
Run for a period of about 5 years solid. The only moving part in this system is water.
Wow.
Produced by a Dr. Oleg Groteskevich in the USSR. What he does is he produced a toroid, that's a donut-shaped container. He covered it on the inside with, I think it was beryllium it was either beryllium or barium, I think it was probably barium, on the inside, and filled it with highly distilled water. Put a whole series of electrical windings or coils around the toroid, and some copper pipes with cooling water to keep it cool enough. And he kicked it off then with a very powerful 110,000 volt sustained discharge of 50 milliwatts for about 3 to 5 minutes to get it going. And that then, pulsing the coils round it, kept the water moving round and round and round continuously. And with little electrodes in it, he was able to pull off 1.5 megawatts of power, and this went on continuously for 5 years.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so this is a device with only water as the moving part. The water never gets used. and lots of power come out of it. You'll be amazed to hear that his workshop was actually burnt down eventually. And they weren't very keen on his generating power because they...
Well, I'm not surprised.
Well, they sell oil in that.
Yeah, that's right. It's exponentially growing, the amount of oil that they're... But you know what's interesting about that last one as well is that the toroid is connected to the golden mean, and that it's just interesting that the water was in a toroidal container.
Yes. There is another rather similar generator that I've just come across, proposed by a gentleman called Mr. Cater, Joseph H. Cater, C-A-T-E-R. He uses distilled water in a plastic tube about 15 inches long, 2.5 inches in diameter, and you put a couple of copper electrodes each end of this and put a battery across it to get it started, and then put an ultrasonic transducer on the outside of the actual container.
What's that?
It's a vibrator that runs at about 600,000 cycles per second.
Thank you.
It's what's used, the sort of thing that's used in a microwave oven.
Okay.
It's what's used in jewelry cleaners.
Right.
Have you ever come across jewelry cleaners?
No.
They're little boxes. You can buy them from Argos. They're little boxes that have got an ultrasonic transducer in them.
Okay.
And it vibrates the water in the container, and the water creates little cavitation bubbles on the device you put it in. So if you pop in a wedding ring that's got dirt worked into the cracks, the water gets into the cracks and little bubbles break off the dirt, and you get your ring coming back out absolutely brand new looking. And it's completely non-invasive. It's very gentle on the actual thing itself. Ultrasonic transducers are used in things like garage door openers, remote controls on televisions and the like. Some of them were infrared, some of them are ultrasonic.
Right.
The motion sensors that are on outdoor lights, they use ultrasonic.
Okay.
So when you walk by and the light plucks on, you say, oh, here, see where you're going. That's because it's an ultrasonic beam. So that's what they're used for generally. But if you put one of those on the container, he reckons that you can take off pretty much unlimited amount of power off it.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Now I don't know of anybody who's replicated that. I've only come across it in the last 2 days. It's now in the ebook, but we must get somebody to try replicating it. My problem is that I'm not really a builder of prototypes.
Well, I was going to ask you actually, have you built any of these devices yourself?
I have produced one or two, but I'm really not an artisan. I'm not skilled in making things. If I make something, it's going to be wobbly.
Okay.
That sort of way.
Okay.
Yes, I can put it together. This is why I prefer electronic things. They don't have to be mechanically perfect.
Right.
I built a Bedini wheel. One of the things we did, you see, down in we ran a couple of seminars down in Wales in the Septembers, and one of them we decided that to show people who were attending that building something like this was quite straightforward. We brought all the bits and pieces, and we had some of the people there actually build a Bedini pulsar wheel as part of the operation in the actual seminar.
Right.
They did it in about 25 minutes, half an hour, and then fired it off, and we were able to demonstrate that it was charging the battery that was supposed to be charged quite nicely and merrily after just a few minutes of actual construction time.
Wonderful.
It used a 20-inch bicycle wheel, 8 magnets, which are very cheap, and a single coil of wire with little pieces of wire pushed in the center to form the core of it, and very, very simple circuitry put together with a screw connector, electrical screw connector. You can use those very nicely to build circuits. The components will fit in one side and the wires fit in the other side. So a row of 12 of these connectors will allow you to build quite a lot of circuitry.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Well, that's one of the things I've used. I've also done the modified fan version of battery charging. I've also done the automotive relay version on battery charging.
Okay.
I've gone most of the part of the way to Tesla switch, but I've never managed to get it finished because so much time is taken up with actually writing and getting the website up to scratch.
Right.
Answering emails, which I get a very large number of. At least that's my excuse for being lazy. But I suppose really the bottom line is I don't like building prototypes.
Wow, that's
I'm quite happy to tell you how to build them.
Yeah, well, you seem very good at that, so, it's wonderful. I mean, you've gone through quite a lot of information here that has covered a lot of questions that I was going to ask you, actually. I mean, the examples that you've given us, I was going to ask you, were there any devices or examples of devices you could see in the future being used for a new sustainable community? I ask everyone that question.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah. About 6 or 7 of those water power generators are in communal places way off the grid in Australia.
Oh, really?
Oh, very much so.
Wonderful.
They've been in use, some of them, for more than 2 years now.
Oh, really?
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is their power source.
And do you have? Are you able to give the names of these communities?
I would prefer not to in this particular moment.
That's fine.
The guy who does most of the conversions is attempting to fend off the opposition by saying that he has, and I'm sure he has, a technique for running car engines on water, which he has documented. And if he gets bumped off, this is going to go on the internet from a lot of other people.
It's really...
He's scared.
Yeah, I can understand. Well, no, I remember a long time ago now, when I was a teenager, I met someone whose friend was taken out while he was on his way on a ferry from England to Germany, because he had invented a car that runs on water, and he was about to make a deal with a company in Germany, and he got bumped off and thrown off the ferry boat, basically.
Oh no, he slipped accidentally and fell over the chest high railing.
Yeah, so it's just I hear so many stories like that.
Absolutely.
And then there's that guy in France who seems to be marketing this compressed air car. What's your view on that? Have you come across?
Well, most of the compressed air cars at the moment aren't self-sustaining.
Right.
There is a design where if you're running more than 30 miles an hour, it will be self-sustaining. But the critical detail on how the compressor is designed and built has been omitted from the patent. And the guy who knows how to do it is more or less paranoid and thinks everybody's out to get him. Won't actually release the details, which is a great pity because it will die off with them.
Yeah.
But compressed air is very good, and it is possible, especially with any of these little electrical things I'm mentioning. Yeah. They could power a compressor as you drive along. But there is something that is worth thinking about. It's supposedly very obvious, but it didn't strike me until very recently when somebody pointed it out. If you think of the electricity that comes out of the socket on your wall at home, you think that that's coming from the power station, or at least I do. You think that the power station burns fuel and spins the generator, creates the electricity. Electricity runs down these big power supply lines up on pylons and comes into your house. In actual fact, it doesn't. What happens is the electricity flows to a substation, and the substation has a big transformer in it. That's what the substation is. Big oil-filled and oil-cooled transformer. And the alternating voltage from the generating station causes an oscillating magnetic field in the step-down transformer in the local substation, and the secondary winding on that step-down transformer is connected to your house.
Right.
It's done 3-phase, and there is a different street in each phase, but that's by the way. But that winding is not electrically connected at all to the primary winding of the step-down transformer. There is no physical connection between the two at all.
Right.
It's induced magnetically. But there are electrons flowing out of the wall in your house. Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
The answer is they're coming from your local environment, and they're induced to flow into your house through this alternating magnetic field. It says if you manage to generate an alternating magnetic field like that, you can gather these free electrons all around you and not bother with the power station at all.
Yes, that's it.
Which is exactly what our good friend Don Smith is doing.
Wow.
So this is quite an obvious and interesting point if you think about it. I mean, you automatically think that, oh, the electricity station, the central power station, is generating the electricity and it flows into my house. Well, it doesn't. Sorry. It flows into a primary winding of the step-down transformer near you, and then it goes back to the power station and you never see it.
Now,
none of the electrons in the power station reach you.
So that's why they'll have everybody believe in the current laws of physics when you have all this proof around you that shows otherwise. I mean, common principles that exist between all the devices that you talk about as well, and it means that really we have to rewrite these hypothesized. They're all theories anyway, I know, and everybody seems to just have very adverse reactions when you discuss these matters.
Yes, well, some of the reason for that is economic.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the people with the most influence are the people in the universities. The universities, professors, and people who do research papers and the like. Now, they, generally speaking, excuse me one moment.
That's right.
I'm sure you're enjoying that tune.
Don't worry. You can answer it if you want.
At least you shut up now in a moment. The situation is that the universities are run and controlled by professors. The professors are there because of their reputation. Their reputation is bolstered continuously by research papers which their students and researchers publish. The research is funded by grants.
That's it.
The grants come from people who are rich enough to provide grants, which is usually people who overcharge other people.
That's right.
Typically the pharmaceutical companies and the oil companies and the like. So if an oil company is funding research and the professor comes along and says, oh, we've got these great projects in hand. One of them is for a free energy device which will produce electricity for no use of fuel at all, and another one is to see how the hair on the cat's tail stands up with the use of photons. They will immediately say, oh yes, we'll have the free energy device please, and forget the cat. Not.
No.
They are not going to fund a project that's going to attack their power base and their income stream. Not under any circumstances.
No.
So the people in the university know this, and if somebody steps out of line, one of the researchers in the university steps out in line and says, oh, but you've got to understand that this is obvious and free and you can do this, or everybody else to save their jobs is going to say, oh, he's mad, he's not, this is totally untrue, it's against the laws of physics, this is impossible, this is perpetual motion. Gee, I wonder where we'd be if there wasn't perpetual motion. We'd all be dead. The universe doesn't operate except with perpetual motion.
Yeah.
The entire universe is vibrating. But anyway.
There was a brilliant presentation that Peter Lindemann did. It was something also that Thomas Joseph Brown passed on to me. I think you've got the link to it on your website as well, with the Tesla conference. And, we're talking about the assumed theories and how the assumption is that electrons are exist and these circuits are powered by electrons.
Yeah.
So, that's just another thing that highlights this whole kind of hoax of knowledge that is only backed by an agenda and an oligarchic system. But, you say that these energy devices are going to emerge. And wrapping up here, this talk, how do you see the next 5 or 10 years unfolding with everything that's going on? It's a big, broad question, but
Yeah, I would see free energy devices being offered for sale in places like China, Hong Kong, and the like. I don't think there's any question about that. The fact that there are such devices on sale there immediately starts raising questions in what's supposedly a democracy here as to how come they can have them and we can't.
Right.
Which is an awkward question to try and answer when the actual answer is we don't want you to have because you pay us more money if you don't have them.
Right.
Politicians don't like sort of answering questions like that. In fact, politicians don't like answering questions, full stop. And they're very good at avoiding answering questions. But anyway,
they are.
No, I can see things coming online. The trouble is with lots of videos on YouTube showing and demonstrating the fact that you've got motors and devices running with no power, and devices which have more power out than in, makes it very difficult to suppress this thing. They'll keep on doing it for a while. They're in the process of trying to censor the internet at this point.
What do you know on that? Because, obviously, I read the end of last year that Britain had put in something like 25 trillion into, it was just some unbelievable amount into monitoring the internet for a year or more. They've been doing that for a long time anyway, when they're going openly public with
yes,
disclosing that they're doing that, and that includes emails, our Skype conversation.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes.
And everything. So, how are they going to try and censor this kind of?
Now they've already got the legislation in Australia. It's now in place.
Oh yes, I heard that.
I think here and the US will be following very shortly. They do it under the guise of anti-terrorism, which is of course a peculiar notion, and under the guise of suppressing paedophiles, because they reckon everybody is against there being terrorists and everybody's against there being paedophiles. So what they want is the power to close down or not allow any particular site that they don't like to be seen on the internet. Now, the sort of sites that are going to close down, I would imagine, will be sites that say, oh, but they're doing it wrong. This government's not doing it right, and so on. Any sites criticizing the government are going to get closed down because they're subversive sites. The same probably with free energy sites and all the like. They will, in theory...
Sorry, so do you think they'll succeed in doing that, or do you think the likes of us will find another way to get this information accessible?
Well, if they do succeed in doing that, it'll just push us back to the era of bulletin boards, whereby somebody hosts on a peer-to-peer network. The system will start up again with peer-to-peer networks.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people out there, I think, that are preparing for that situation, and I think there's various internet systems which are called, one called Freenet, but you need enough people to use it for it to work, you see.
Yeah,
I've got that one on my laptop, but I've been on it a few times and it doesn't work because there's not enough people on there.
Well, I must admit I've never heard of it. What's it called again?
It's just called Freenet, and you can set the security systems yourself so that you don't get monitored so well. I'll email the details to you,
okay. But
I've just trying to get my head around using it, and I just don't find it very easy to use.
Yes.
Well, Patrick, it's just been wonderful talking to you. Really a privilege to have you on the show, and if you'd like to come back, you'd be very welcome to.
I have no problem at all. If you want me, just call me.
I will, definitely.
But, I'm sorry to have taken up so much of your time.
You have not. It's been a pleasure. It's very valuable information, and we've got to get it out there as soon as we can, I say.
Yeah, we're still only scratching the surface here.
Yeah, well, that's why you must come back.
And in spite of what you said and what you say, I still would only rate myself as being a very beginner in this. Seriously. The people who are experts are not very voluble. They don't tend to talk very much about what they're doing. And it is quite difficult to actually get information out there.
Well, that's why we have to all work together, and we have to have organisations like Panacea and Orion. I don't know what you think of the Orion project.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure at all. I don't know what to make of it.
I've got that somewhere up on my website. Yeah, it could be a complete...
I don't know.
I don't know, but there's some things out there you just don't know whether they're really the real McCoy or not.
Absolutely.
But there's communities and groups and organisations that are coming together, and you're in touch with quite a few of those, and people can follow links on your website, and we just need more of that, and more education, more awareness, and for the public to interact with people like you, and then these inventors will feel a bit more secure because they'll have a bit more of a public domain to feel safe.
Yes, it's not just a case of feeling safe though, it's a case of funding. It is extremely difficult for a developer to get sufficient money together to do good research, and when they do finish up with a very good product, it's nearly impossible to market it.
Yeah. Because
the people step in to prevent that. I mean, they take the case of Caltech again. They developed a carburetor, give about 150 miles a US gallon, no pollution. They tested it fully. They set up with a company to market it. As soon as they did, the company was bought out and the section closed down. And not a single one has ever reached the market, in spite of Caltech spending $1 million developing it and testing it.
It's heartening. But you say that you feel positive that there will be some that will break through there.
So if Caltech can't do it, who can?
And they'll be doing it in China.
Yes, in China, yeah. Like I say, the World Expo is on at the moment, demonstrating and probably selling them. The trouble would be to bring them in here. I could see you getting stopped at customs and saying, "Oh, you can't take that in. That's not safe. Sorry, we'll keep that. Goodbye." But there will be other countries that will do it. It's mainly economic constraints that are stopping it in our areas, and they will continue using those. I mean, if you were in their place, you would as well. I certainly would if I was in their shoes. Well, if I was like them, I would. I'm not like them.
Well, that's it. You see, we're not. And this is a humanitarian subject. Free energy and sustainability is a human right we are being denied.
Yes, indeed.
And we have to work towards making people aware of that.
Well, we're being suckers. They're selling us something that's freely available all around us.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. Really is.
True.
But anyway.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Patrick, for the time.
Yeah, thanks very much for calling.
And I'll just go over your website address again for listeners. It's www.free-energy-info.co.uk. Okay. All right, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Okay.
All the best. Bye.
Thanks very much. All the best. Bye-bye.
The sun needs the earth also to shine upon. Yet there are those who love the dark. Should the sun stop shining? Everything happens at its own time. What is strong must also be right, for only then will it last. If clouds obscure it, does the sun hurry past them? Clouds will pass. Every day the sun rises again.
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने रे।
पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नाणे रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने रे। सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे निंदा न करे के नीरे।
वाच वाच मन निश्चल राखे धन धन जननी तेरी रे। वैष्णव जन को तेरे कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने रे।
समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी परसी जेने मात रे।
समदृष्टि तृष्णा त्यागी परसी जेने मात रे। जिहाथ असत न बोले पर धन नव जाले हाथ रे।
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने रे। मोह माया पे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जेना मन मारे। मोह माया पे नहीं जेने दृढ़ वैराग्य जेना मन मारे। राम नाम सो तानी लागी सकल तीरथ सेना तन मारे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे पीड़ पराई जाने रे। बन लोभीने कपट रहित छे काम क्रोध निवार्या रे।
दर्शन कर
वैष्णव जन को तेने कहिए पीड़ पराई जाने। पर दुखी उपकार करे तोए मन में